The next day. The Transgression Academy for the Magical Arts. The Grand Dining Hall. Local time, 12:25 hours. Thasia. There was a certain sense of normalcy that came with the fourth-day periods. It lacked the explosive rhetoric that tainted Professor Artcourt's lessons, yet it wasn't as elementary and inoffensively bland as was the case with Professor Vanavan's lectures. I couldn't yet compare it to Professor Maltori's classes, as Apprentice Lariel and now Professor Sorasar were very much not representative of the elf's proclivities, or at least that's what I assumed. Physical education was, frankly, a foregone conclusion, in that my opinions of such a blatantly arduous course were as self-evident as my royal pedigree would lead most to believe, much to the chagrin of two of my peers. All of this was to say that, despite the banality of potions as a subject, there was indeed something compelling to be found. Which was much more than I could say for Eleanor's inane tirades into the bazaar, as he plodded from conversation topic to conversation topic, unable to commit, or rather unable to understand, that I had little patience for trivial drivel, when our interests simply did not align. But an idiot, the Venerian, was not. Rather, he was simply stubborn to a fault, which meant I should have expected the non sequitur that followed. "Are you betrothed?" That question emerged with the same inexplicable nature as any one of Emma's actions. My eyes narrowed as I shifted gently in my seat, setting both teaspoon and teacup down with a calculated poise that any noble worth their etiquette training would interpret as a rude rebuff. "Excuse me?" I shot back, sharply. "I'm merely asking you a question, Princess. Are you or are you not betrothed?" He stood his ground, wearing that signature Venerian smirk that had not merely found home on his visage, but that had since claimed regency over his entire persona. "You are being rather forward, Eleanor." "I didn't mean it like that, Princess," the Venerian interjected, shaking his head as he did so. "Seeing as this conversation has grown rather one-sided, and owing to the ever-encroaching march of time, I wish to introduce a topic that would undoubtedly garner your attention." He spoke with words drenched in self-assured pride. "Seeing your rather visceral reaction to this topic, I would say my approach has succeeded, no?" I eyed the Venerian down with a judgment gaze, but eventually relented, deciding to tempt the fates. I would have assumed that an eminent mind such as your own would have been more than capable of determining a matter most self-evident. Yes, but I simply wish to— "The answer is no, Eleanor," I interrupted, with a pointed response before letting out a sigh. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the silence speak for itself before continuing. "Was that all?" I shot out sharply. "Not in the slightest!" Eleanor practically beamed out, and like an adventurer cornering his deadly prey, he wore a toothy grin as he pointed to the tables around us. But I couldn't predict what would come next. Oris and Ladona." He gestured his eyes towards the table in question, one which currently lacked the Pronarthia realm in question. "Would you say they are courting?" I blinked my eyes rapidly in both mild surprise and a certain level of incredulity. "I wouldn't have the slightest idea." "Oh, His Majesty, you don't!" Eleanor interjected, crossing his legs and raising his nose up at me. "Out of all of our peers, I know you to be the most analytical, at least in matters pertinent to the more refined lifestyles led by highborns of our caliber, of course," he insisted, and even went so far as to provide what felt less like a backhanded compliment and more so a genuine acknowledgement of competence. My eyes widened, as I had to ask myself, where did this Eleanor come from? "So, please, humour me, Princess," he insisted, before simply shrugging and then looking the other way. "Or not. Though you could consider this to be work of a sort," he added slyly, as he began the tested but rather stale tactic of simply recontextualizing the request. "Consider this a meeting of the minds, a spy master circle, if only for the purposes of determining the web of connections that we may use to our advantage." I let out a frustrated breath, my eyes once more locking with the Venerian over the modest spread of food in front of us. Part of me wished not to even entertain those inflammatory words with the dignity of a response. But my time with Emma, and perhaps my own boredom, had changed my tolerances in the entertainment of tripe and drivel. "Lord Ping is impulsive," I began plainly. Lady Ladona, while more thoughtful, is still prone to acting brashly as far as social decorum allows. Their peer group, consisting of the now subdued Lorsi and the ever-tepid Siata, are neither obstacles nor impediments in the countering of whatever in-group norms either Ping or Ladona may wish to impose. This results in a lack of social reprimand and a lack of any opposition, social or otherwise, should Ping, or even Ladona, wish to pursue courtship. Eleanor's eyes practically lit up throughout my analysis as he leaned in closer, as if poised for a whisper, despite the practically perpetual privacy screen we both had put up.
That's assessing context and external factors, Princess. I'm asking what you think of their dynamics. Are they interested? Do they seem viable? Is there a spark there, or is this merely the de facto rule of a king and queen in sight alone?
You're asking me for a definitive answer that I simply do not have.
I'm asking for your personal take, Princess. Do you pair them, or do you not pair them?
Eleanor grinned excitedly, as if this, whatever it was, constituted as a recreational activity for his ceaselessly rambunctious mind. I took a moment to sip the tea in front of me, letting the Nexian stew in his own thoughts for a while, before once again locking eyes with his excited gaze. Yes, I do pair them, as you say.
You speak with such hesitation, Princess. Don't tell me you haven't partaken in the age-old discussions of pairing before.
I blinked my eyes slowly in response, once again setting both teacup and silverware down with deliberate intent. I had neither the time, the privilege, nor the opportunity for such trivial discussions, Eleanor.
Ah.
The Venerian paused, and unlike his previous attempts to relentlessly dig into what were obviously insecurities beneath the veil, he seemed to merely acknowledge the implications of my answer with a passing nod. But this momentary lapse in excitement passed rather quickly, and if anything, the noble seemed even more emboldened to strike further because of it. Though his target, rather surprisingly, was focused externally this time around.
We'll make up for lost time then, shall we?
He grinned, before gesturing his eyes at Quiv's table.
Quiv and Aerith. Now that's a rather foregone conclusion, no?
One would imagine, yes, I responded, before the Venerian seemed poised for a counter of his own proposition.
Oh, by his eternal wisdom, of course not. That's an unimaginative fool's response. How could I be so short-sighted?
He rested the back of his hand against his head as he spoke.
How could I have forgotten the second, yet just as equally compelling possibility? Quiv and Rostario, that scheming, slimy, conniving, and ladder-climbing pair, are a match made in the abyssal flames.
The Venerian cackled before once again levelling his eyes on me.
Wouldn't you agree, Princess?
I took a sharp glance at the table in question, inexplicably meeting Aerith's gaze as she levelled what I could only describe as a death glare in my direction. From my understanding, neither realm seems to hold any reservations on such arrangements, so I do not see why not, I answered plainly.
Princess, please! I did say I wish for more daring observations, no? We are looking for interpersonal elements, not political discourse, nor the constraints placed upon personal desire brought on by adjacent customs.
Eleanor paused, as if wishing to go back on one of those subjects.
On second thought, discussions on these matters do serve as the seasoning and spice to pairing dynamics, he admitted with a sly grin. Though the way you phrase it makes it feel less like a dynamic discussion and more like a spy master's briefing.
Isn't that what you wish to frame this whole conversation, Eleanor? A spy master's arrangement?
Ah!
Came the Venerian's response.
I admit that was the initial conceit, Princess, but would you at the very least please entertain the possibility of conversation?
All right, I shrugged. Let's turn to Atholin's group, shall we?
Eleanor grinned widely. That's the spirit. Now, who do you think is paired with whom?
I let out a tired sigh, my eyes levelling across the members of that group, if only discreetly. If we were to... I paused, shrugging, as I attempted to see things from Eleanor's perspective this time around. But even then, I had some strong reservations against the unhealthy pairings the Venerian so desperately wished to be spelled out. We are not going to even entertain the prospects of Atholin and that demon Iphilus. I stood firm, though I paused, narrowing my gaze at the two remaining members of his group. I could see Lord Telios Lophim and Lady Iflisiat as you say, pair.
Oh, do you now?
Eleanor responded radiantly.
Tell me, is it Telios's subdued stoicism? His quiet yet unassuming persona? His seemingly immovable will that could potentially stand up to Iflis's unstoppable rage?
The Venerian spoke with a rising vocal crescendo, itching towards a precipice that felt cruel to undermine. Yes, I acknowledged. He is seemingly the only person in the group who would not fold under Ifilis. Itholin, well, we both understand why he would buckle and falter at the foot of Ifilis's ceaseless rage. Camille Leon? The man would just vanish and hide, as is stereotypically expected, given his kind's inherent inclinations towards camouflage. That leaves the quiet yet stoic Telios Lophim, though I cannot help but wonder precisely what the man's angle is. I find there to be something deeper to his story.
Oh, I'm sure there is, Princess,
Eleanor responded in a genuinely friendly manner, ignoring his food and instead diving headfirst into conversation.
Now that leaves Itholin up in the air,
he pondered vocally.
Camille Leon strikes me as the type to merely run from all things, both problems and opportunities. So exactly who would?
The Venerian paused before letting out a devious cackle.
Emma Booker, perhaps?
My eyes widened in confusion, then outright incredulity. Excuse me?
Think about it, Princess. The Rontalis Realmer has already made his opening moves. First in the assembly in front of crowds 100 strong, wherein he openly requested Emma's audience. Then, in his bait and switch, as he first fulfilled the role of the opportunistic adversary for a position in the quest for the ever-blooming blossom, before just as deftly pulled the rug from under Pink's feet. The slippery weasel continues to twist and turn, merging right and wrong with slights and retributions. At the end of the day, the man's a merchant, and he knows how to play at an unsuspecting damsel's heartstrings.
I blinked once, then twice, as my eyes eventually caught the cocky Venerian's gaze with yet another Avenel glare. And how did you come to these conclusions? I asked plainly.
See my last point, Princess,
Eleanor rebuffed, not once flinching from my gaze.
The man's a merchant. Whether or not these unspoken courtly advances are genuine is up in the air. What I do know is that he wishes for a numerous riches. Or more accurately, he wishes to be what I myself ordained for at the beginning of this adventure.
Overlordship? I clarified.
Correct. Now his aims at overlordship are very much limited to the mercantile variety, owing to the limits of his abilities as both an adjacent realmer and a rather pathetic and weak one at that. He shrugged.
I see, I acknowledged.
The poor soul is in for a rude awakening once Emma inundates him with the truth,
Eleanor added, taking a sip of his tea in the process, clearly not wishing to come face to face with the implications of his own sentiments. I couldn't help but humph loudly at that angle of attack, as it very much implied a certain level of acknowledgement as to Urfrom's capabilities. It is often the case that I find those most interested in others to be deeply lacking in their own affairs, Eleanor, I spoke, leading the momentum this time around. Seeing as you are oh so interested in the affairs of others, let us hear of your own exploits. Are you betrothed or courting someone?
Very forward of you to ask, Princess.
Using my own rebuttals against me is a moot point, and doing so is a tactic so far beneath the average Nexian ability, no? The Venerian harumphed at that rebuke, before shifting to that cocky and confident smile he so often returned to.
No, I am not courting, Princess, for I find such affairs to be beneath me.
I couldn't help but to cock my head slightly at this, garnering but a dismissive wave from the Nexian.
I don't expect you, nor most others, to understand. I am simply uninterested in such matters. To be frank, I am already betrothed.
He spoke cryptically, as I merely raised a Brian's suspicion, urging him to continue.
I have been from the first day I opened my eyes to the world.
A prearranged promised betrothal? I wished to posit. Though knowing Eleanor, I knew there was something else to this grand sweeping claim. So I bided my time and remained silent.
Aren't you going to ask?
Continue, Eleanor, I responded with a sigh.
As I was saying, I have already since been betrothed. Nay, I am already married to the arts.
He raised both hands up wide.
Where would I find time for another's whinings when I have the arts, music, poetry, and, above all else, my own political ambitions to consider?
I knew it, I thought to myself, feeling rather vindicated in my silence.
Is there nothing sweeter than a warm apple tart, cut with a mellow Eversong tea, in the midst of 4 bardic troops serenading you in the comfort of your courtyard?
He offered.
I find that to be more soulfully stimulating than any love.
Perhaps, and at the risk of speaking in empty platitudes, you have yet to find the one to light the spark, yet? I offered. Though Eleanor refused to respond, at least not immediately, as he simply let out yet another chuckle.
Believe me, Princess, there was a reason why I wish for overlordship as my path to prominence. I simply can't stand the thought of committing to another. At least, not beyond the realm of the platonic and camaraderie.
It was, at this point, perhaps too far deep into our rapid back and forths, that Eleanor finally realised the extent of his frankness. The next scene quickly pulled back, clearing his throat as he once more shoved a piece of cake into his gaping maw.
So, with that out of the way, perhaps we should continue to look inwards, no?
He offered, sliding seamlessly back into that carefree persona. Go on?
Thalmin, our dear mercenary prince. Do you believe him to be betrothed?
We both stared at each other vacantly following this question, as something seemed to click without a word being exchanged. The Highborn's handshake, as the Nexians called it.
He is!
Oh, he most certainly is. The both of us spoke in unison.
Now, for the most opaque among us, Cadet Emma Booker, do you believe her to be betrothed?
I don't believe so, I responded curtly.
You don't believe so? Or you don't wish it to be so?
Eleanor jabbed, with a smug and aggravating grin. I'm speaking based on objective truths, Eleanor. Considering everything we've learned of her society and its egalitarian tendencies, I doubt family or house could force individuals together in an arranged marriage.
That's betrothal by authority, Princess, but that doesn't discount betrothal by choice or through courting, in which case, my question still stands.
I gave the question some thought, more thought than I had in most other instances. A fact Eleanor was quick to notice as he placed both sides of his snout between his hands.
What are you thinking about, Princess?
Based on what we know, I don't believe she is, Eleanor, but perhaps this is a good time to move on, yes? I gestured at the room's grand timekeeping artifice. We are close to the end of lunch.
As you wish, Princess.
Eleanor spoke in a sing-song voice, as we both turned to watch the professors filing out of the room. However, in the midst of that, the both of us couldn't help but to notice a certain presence running down our spines, as if the gazes of 1,000 burning suns were somehow focused on the both of us, or rather, me in particular. We both turned to unexpectedly meet the raging inferno behind Eret Eris's eyes, whose glare was only stopped the instant she noticed our shifting attention. I let out a sigh, ignoring it as the attendants began clearing our table, plate by fine plate.
And you're certain you've never crossed paths with this lesser Avenor before? Never slighted her personally, or in any official capacity?
Yes, Eleanor, I reiterated.
This animosity is far, far more extreme than what I would have expected.
He paused mid-sentence, letting out a sharp sigh of realization, as if something had finally settled into place in the infinite puzzle that was life.
But that's just what we wanted, didn't we?
Correct, I acknowledged. This seemingly harmless moniker spoken in jest, spoken in humour, and perpetuated in common vernacular by Nexian intent, has since shown the seas of animosity between Aetheron Realm and Shatterrealmer, where there should have naturally been none, all as a result of our superficial similarities and the Nexus's preference for our aesthetics over the Shatterrealmers.
That and carefully crafted seas of distracting dissent,
Eleanor spoke darkly.
An artificial animosity to distract from more pertinent issues,
the Venerian acknowledged.
Also allowing for needless mediation to decorate the laurels of some self-proclaimed grand diplomat from the Crownlands.
A raging heart burns brighter than a thoughtful mind, I reasoned. Eret perhaps isn't inherently evil. She's simply acting out of the offence inflicted on her people's identity. A rather understandable reaction for an honour disgraced, wouldn't you agree?
Eleanor responded. Regardless of what it is, we should keep a close eye on her. I wouldn't worry if Quiv is around, but with Quiv currently indisposed...
Erit may see this as an opportunity to find some form of misguided retribution. I finished Eleanor's sentence for him.
Indeed, he nodded.
However, no sooner did we come to that conclusion were the plates completely cleared. Following which, we immediately left for the afternoon's lessons. We didn't want to be late for class, after all.
The township of Sips. The inn. The royal suite. Local time 12:40 hours. Emma.
Quest time elapsed. 47 hours, 40 minutes and 20 seconds. Time remaining, 120 hours, 19 minutes and 40 seconds. I heard a groan. Then a stirring of stiff sheets. My eyes winced as they blinked and were immediately greeted not with the comfortable confines of the tent or the now heavenly open spaces of my bedroom back home, but instead a bright and glowing screen inches from my face. I wasn't claustrophobic. This was something I found out many times over. Shuttles didn't bother me, nor did the tight confines of a true space station. But power armor? There was something about being able to wiggle around, yet not too much, that made this particular aspect of suit life acutely claustrophobic. It was that awkward combination of being allotted some freedom of movement, combined with the tightness and fit of the exoskeleton that really did it, especially with the exoskeleton locked where my body was free to move in a space measured in centimeters and inches. And despite the space probably being a cave diver's paradise, it simply was not enough for me, especially upon waking up from weird and nonsensical dreams. However, in spite of all of that, the claustrophobia and fear went away with one simple command. Give me motor control, Evie. Acknowledged. The unlocking of the exoskeleton and the free motions of his actuators brought me back into the world. Though despite the relief that came with being in control, one realization arrived to bring anxiety skyrocketing all the way back to the stratosphere. Local time, 12:40 hours. We were 4 hours behind schedule. I rushed over to the still passed out Thalmin, shaking him to wakefulness and suffering dearly for it. Alert! Localized surge of mana radiation detected, 400% above background radiation levels. Or at least, I would have, if the attack wasn't a pure magical assault. The prince huffed and held Ember Stride firmly in his hand before realizing what had just transpired.
Ancestors! Emma! Are you alright?
Yeah, not a scratch, I responded.
Alright, then might I ask why the hell you woke me up like that?
He quickly reverted to a friendly yet stern and very much warranted aggression once the matter of my non-existent injuries were cleared up. We're late, I responded simply, before moving over to the blinds and immediately drawing them, unleashing the harsh brightness of the mid-afternoon sunlight. This finally stirred something within the prince, as all grogginess from the previous night dissipated. The sheer dread in his face was one shared amongst many a soldier, especially in situations such as these, as he sprinted to the bathroom, trailing behind duvets, mattress toppers, and various other fur-covered fabrics in his wake. The sound of running water was heard next, as it was clear the princess was making a mad dash for morning preparations. With the ball now in Thalmin's court, I quickly turned to the Evie, my brows scrunched with frustration. Evie? Yes, Cadet Booker. Why the hell didn't you wake me up? I set a timer for like 8:30, 8:40, 8:45, 9, 9:05, 9:09, 9:15, 9:20, and 9:30, didn't I? I ran through the list of staggered alarms, each of which was still very clearly marked active. Correct. Then why didn't it work? Did I just not respond to the audible alarms? You could have just shook me or something. Alarms were overridden. What? I shot back sharply. By who? Override executed under Health and Safety Restorative Care Directive 12A. Mission operator must maintain baseline cognitive readiness and acceptable physiological status. Analysis under log 28.192.91.A indicated high risk of diminished performance at operator-designated rest cycle cessation intervals. Continuation of rest cycle was prioritized. My heart skipped a beat as I immediately brought up my hands, twiddling my fingers and moving around my wrists for good measure. Motor function at 100% capacity. I wasn't talking to you, I shot back as I tested for any delays, for any hints of, "Let's go," Thalmin shouted from down the hall, somehow already in his full armor. That was surprisingly quick.
Magic-assisted martial drilling, he interjected with a cocky grin. Standard stuff for Havenbrockian battle mages. Now, come on, Emma, let's get moving.
Right, yeah, I nodded, trailing behind Thalmin, who began sprinting through the halls at a brisk pace. It was only when we reached the elevators, however, that he spoke again, cocking his head in concern.
Are you all right? You sounded like you saw a ghost or something.
No, it's fine. I guess I'm still a bit frazzled from last night. This prompted the prince to punch me softly in the shoulder.
Are you that much of a lightweight that even being in proximity to alcohol causes you to become hungover?
He chided, eliciting a reciprocal chuckle from my end. Nah, I guess I'm just tired is all. Fighting 2 magical monsters 2 days in a row is a bit...
You get used to it, Emma,
Thalmin grinned, just as we arrived at the bottom floor. Ding! The next few moments were a real flurry of activity. The hotel manager, along with the rest of his staff, were lined up to greet the both of us. However, the prince's mercenary proclivities took over as he gave them the briefest of acknowledgements before rushing to the buffet table, grabbing meats, pastries, and all sorts of delectable goodies, and going to town on them immediately after. To distract the staff from Thalmin's less than princely actions, I quickly addressed the manager, smiling pleasantly all the while. Thank you, Mr.
Edmure Gar.
He bowed deeply. Yes, thank you, Mr. Gar, and to all the staff here today, I continued. Thank you for your hospitality and for, well, everything, really. On behalf of both Earthrealm and Havenbrockrealm, I attempted my hand at morning diplomacy, though it was clear I wasn't at full yapping strength just yet.
You're most welcome, my lady.
Now, I hope you don't mind, but I was wondering, since we were in a bit of a hurry, if you could help pack the morning buffet as, provisions, or...
We have already taken the liberty of doing that, my lady.
The man gestured at a neatly wrapped package sitting by the double-door entrance. Ah, thank you, Mr. Gar.
To serve is to live, my lady.
He bowed once more before I moved to the double doors, alongside a now full-bellied Thalmin. Though before we crossed the threshold, I couldn't help but quickly glance back to the tavern, witnessing what I could only describe as a literal disaster that the staff was still busy cleaning up. Right, I sighed, as we both instinctively reached to cover our eyes from the afternoon's blazing sun. We'll take the V4 seat to the Kelpie and from there to the portal to Telesir?
Sounds good,
Thalmin acknowledged, once more taking the awkward back seat as we surged forwards towards the stables. Nilsley Pool Spa Town. Lady Lomadiala's illustrious and grand rest and rejuvenation hotel and spa. Lady Lomadia's private thermal suite, number 1. Local time 12:57 hours. Lady Synthis. Unbothered. A voice spoke softly, and through the angelic harp strings of a bardic troupe hidden behind the walls. Moisturized. Another disembodied voice rang out, their words lusciously and tingly, sending a ceaseless vibration down my spine and through my floating form. Happy in my own lane. The first voice rang out, occasionally ringing a gong in between each word. The whole room was scented with diffusers, and incense emanating the sharp and refreshing notes of citrus, the deep and earthy notes of lemongrass, as well as the soft and flighty perfumes of flowers plucked from across the realm. The water we floated in was likewise infused, brimming and bubbling with heated rocks that kept the water just at the cusp of boiling, exuding a constant and ever-present steam. I felt my worries wash away as I breathed in both the aerosolized herbs and sweet perfection of concoctions passed down over countless eons. The Nexians had perfected relaxation, just as they had perfected everything else the civilized mind could dream of. Focused, the second voice spoke, her words combined with the harmony of the music around me once again, sending sharp tingles down my spine. And flourishing, the first voice once more bellowed, this time with such a deepness that I felt my core shuddering in response. Everything was all right with the world. Everything was beautiful and untainted. Everything was perfect. And in that perfection, I couldn't help but think of Prince.
Slam! Oi, oi, oi! What's all this steam, then? I can't see a bloody thing! Ah! Splash!
What was that? I screamed, turning to Talia as we each removed the cucumbers from our eyes. I don't know, Lady Synthis, but that yelling sounded an awful lot like Apprentice Ral out. Sploosh! A figure emerged from the water, face obscured by the steam, gasping for air with arms splashing haphazardly.
Oi, oi! What a coincidence seeing you lot here! Shouldn't you be picking flowers or what have you? In any case, have you perchance seen either the new Roma or... Ah!
We all screamed and, in a panicked blur, blasted him back with everything we had.
The Township of Sips. Local Transportium Junction. Local time 13:05 hours. Emma.
Say, you wonder how that apprentice is doing on that boat? I turned to Thalwyn on my V4C, my gaze turned upwards at the prince, who now sat regally atop the perpetually dripping magical equine.
Can't say I care, to be honest.
Thalwyn shrugged.
So, are you ready for your first trip through the Transportium, Emma?
You betcha, I grinned, as we both surged forwards at the insistence of the Transportium attendant.